Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. With over 30 years at the helm of growth and transformation, Jane Gentry is a sought-after, high-impact business strategist and leadership powerhouse. She's an executive coach and a keynote speaker who helps leaders scale smarter, lead stronger, and sell better. She's advised Fortune 500 giants like Coca-Cola and Mercedes, and now brings those same high-performance strategies to small and mid-market companies looking to boost value, navigate succession, or accelerate growth. Armed with her proprietary optimal value blueprint, Jane helps business build healthy, profitable organizations that thrive in transition and command top value market. To top it off, she's the podcast host of CEO Unscripted. Hello, Jane, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Hello, thank you. We're switching roles today. I love it.
We are, because very recently, our audience might not know, but they will soon, that you interview me for your podcast. And I love that kind of synergy and collaboration and just getting to know incredible people like you, Jane. So I appreciate that you say yes to coming to Back to Basics.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And, I like to dig deeper into the origin stories of my guests. Like, I love to ask about who younger Jane was, what were your dreams, who did you think you were going to become? And just give us a little bit of a background story as to how far did you land from where you thought you were going to go?
So far.
That's great. I like that.
My father was in the military. So I moved every 4 years until I was about 30. I'm one of 3 children. I have 2 younger brothers who were born in the Panama Canal Zone.
Oh, wow.
When we were in the military. And it was an okay life for a kid growing up until I had to move my freshman year of high school. And that was really a hard move for me. I really struggled with that. High school's a funky time in your life, right? So I'm accustomed to meeting people and being the new person where, going somewhere. And when I was in high school, I was very involved in the theater and wanted to be a professional actor. And when I went to college, to undergrad, my father said, I will not pay for that. He wanted me to be a journalist. And so we compromised my first year of college, and I went into broadcasting. And after one semester, I said to my father, this is not where my heart is. I don't want to do this. I'm going to do theater. And he just kind of said, "Rot's a ruck," and cut off the money. Yeah. Wow. So I put myself through undergrad with a degree in musical theater and went to graduate school on a full ride and a teaching assistantship, and got out of school and moved to Chicago because if you look at me, I'm not very California looking and I'm not very New York looking. So I'm like, well, I'm very Midwestern. So I went to Chicago and tried to do some work there. Got engaged there and had a lot of student loan debt to pay off, as you can imagine. well, probably not as much as people have today, but probably $30,000 of debt. So I decided to get a job to pay down some debt. I called my father and I said, what do you think I could do? He said, you would be great at outside sales. I said, oh, okay. What is that? So I started interviewing and got my first job with an exhibit house in Chicago, who are the people that build and manage large trade show exhibits for companies. So that I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I love it. I'm like, oh, okay, go refill my coffee. I could keep hearing you, but there's a lot. What an interesting start you had, because obviously, being with your dad being in the military. I want to pause there because I'm sure that's something that some people in the audience, like me, like I know people, but it's not my experience. What's the one thing that you would say everybody should know about families that are, raised or kids that are raised in the military that maybe people don't realize? And then when you get together with those friends, you say, oh yeah, like this, you can relate to something that people maybe are not aware.
Yeah. So I think if you're a kid that has been raised moving a lot, whether it's the military or something else, you either become a gypsy or a nester. And it will take a crane to get me out of my house at this point. Right. Some people, they just tend to like to move a lot because they're accustomed to that. And then other people, we just dig in and nest, and so I think that's one thing. I wouldn't necessarily say everybody's great at building new relationships, at friendships. My brothers are completely different than I am. But you do get put in difficult situations that you've got to be able to maneuver.
Yeah, I have great respect for people that have that upbringing, because I come from very different. Like I was 17 years in the same school, pre-K to high school, very stable. And actually, my husband is kind of like you. His dad wasn't in the military, but he's lived in 7 countries. He always said, I don't know, he's been to more schools that I ever, could count. And one thing he said, I learned very early on that making friendships, sometimes it wasn't worth it, because every time I would make a friend, I would move.
Yeah. So one of the hardest lessons I learned, I remember, when I moved my freshman year, I was devastated. And I kept wanting to go back. And so at some point, my parents let me go back to see my friends in my other school. And life had just moved on without me, Leticia. And it was heartbreaking to me to realize that, right? That everything was not the same when I went back there. Everybody had kind of moved on, and I needed to move on as well. So yeah, that was a hard lesson for me. I don't think it's a waste to build friendships. Between that and being a road warrior for the first 20 years of my career or more, I have a friend in every major city. There's somebody in every city that I can call and have dinner with.
That's so awesome. I agree. In that sense, I guess we're very similar. And when you realize that no matter where you are, you can find a friend, and it's just such a great thing.
Yeah. And you're my new Miami connection right there. There you have it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And so, Jane, on the other side, I have to give you a compliment, because not everybody would stand up to say, I want to study this, which, by the way, my kid is also my son, who just graduated middle school yesterday. He has a scholarship of musical theater, so he loves that stuff as well.
Good for him.
Not everybody would say this is what I want to do, that. And you stood up to your dad, and I mean, and credit to him, he threatened with cutting you off, and he did, which is also not any. You can tell he was in the military.
Yeah.
Any second thoughts or any reflections upon that decision? Do you still will go with it? Any learnings that maybe
Yeah.
understanding more
So
where your dad was coming
yes.
from?
So really, from some perspectives, I don't really fit there. That's a lifestyle that I have a very deep faith, number one, and that is a hard environment for a person like that.
Mhm.
So I'll just be right
Yeah,
frank
I
with
hear
you
you.
about
Yeah.
that. So I kind of don't fit there. Do I regret the decision? Absolutely not. And I tell my 5 nieces, that's how you tell that how badly you want something, that you invest yourself in it and you take a risk to do it. And now what I deal with CEOs every day. And I have to say, learning business, I find much easier the 30 years I've had to learn about business than learning about how to communicate with people, how to have presence on a stage and own a stage, how to read a room. Those are things that it's hard to teach people how to do, right? So I think that education has served me very well. No clients have ever asked me to sing in a meeting, which but the business part for me was very, very easy to learn. And I mean, today I coach at Harvard. So,
It's
you know,
amazing.
I have no regrets for doing that.
And that's so admirable. And yeah, I missed that part. I mean, you had so much on your intro. So you've coached leaders at all levels. Let's get a little bit into more. And then of course your podcast, which we'll talk about it, but you talk to CEOs. And do you
Yeah.
have you developed your take on like maybe what separates like good managers from exceptional leaders?
Yeah. Managers look at tactics. Managers tend to, so if I were to give you, if we use a sales manager, for example, a lot of sales managers misunderstand their job because they think their job is to manage the number at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. That's really not their job. Their job is to motivate, coach, and hold people accountable, right? And those are the things that show you that a sales manager is going to become a good leader when they do those things. And they're not just they're managing the things that get you to the number, right? A leader is managing the vision and communicating the vision, making sure everybody understands where are we going. They're creating an environment for people to succeed. So that's culture. And they make sure that everybody has the tools and the training to be successful. That's what a leader does. And when I ran the companies that I ran, that's the first thing that I said to the organization. This is my job, right? And if I've done these things well and you aren't succeeding, I'm probably going to give you a mirror, right? Because if I've cast the vision well and you know where we're headed, you've got an environment where you can thrive and you've got the tools and training to make you successful. I've done my part.
Mm, mm. That's powerful. That's powerful for a leader to acknowledge, I think, because sometimes you want to do more or you think you want to fix things, but you're presenting it as a way where you're an enabler.
Yeah, because in my experience working with mid-market CEOs, when they don't realize that's their role, they become a bottleneck in the
Mhm.
company. They become a detractor instead of being additive to the company. And as the company grows, the leader needs to grow and change with the company, right? And if they're leading the same way at 20 million as they are at 80 million, then the company is about to experience some, I call them growing pains. And it's from the leader, comes from the leader. Yeah.
Mm. That's very, very powerful thought, because it's like sometimes, and I've said this before, it's like even at certain levels as a CEO, as I've always seen it as a team anyway. And depending what you're trying to achieve and whatever it is your title or your position is, I personally still try to think about what kind of game this is. Sometimes you're playing a soccer World Cup game, and sometimes you're playing, just a friendly match. And the strategy cannot be the same, even if the game is the same.
Well, I've said to some CEOs in manufacturing, because I try to speak their language, right? You're a distributor, not a manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your job is to be a distributor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're still doing manufacturing and your company's at 30 million, you're getting in the way of the success of the company.
Very, very, very good stuff.
So, yeah.
Very good stuff. So you actually develop, anybody listening to you right now, me included, say, oh, Jane knows what she's talking about. Not only you have the credentials, but you're talking to very actionable, very specific, I think, operational things. That is good, and it's refreshing, because sometimes, you hear business coach or something like that, and they give you like the 10,000 level view, but this sounds tangible to me. So you develop a proprietary, you call it the optimal value blueprint. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, we start out with a pretty intensive diagnostic of a company. So we look at three things to start with. One is, I would call it a maturity index. So in the functions of your organization, process, organizational design, finance, marketing, sales, where is the opportunity for improvement, and how would we rank the most important things to focus on? Sometimes I find CEOs, especially at the smaller end of mid-market, have what I call shiny object syndrome. They chase the things that are easier to solve or fun to solve, right? Branding. I worked with a CEO who was in media, right? And media is going to streaming. Well, what she did was on the television, in the old, doing the back end of delivering commercials. And she had just spent $180,000 on a new brand. And I said to her, can you get your money back? First of all, there's nothing wrong with your brand. And secondly, your brand is so far down the list of things that are important, I don't even see it. You need a strategy, or you're going to be out of business in 5 years, right? So is it fun to do a brand? Yes. You get the fun little book with all the stuff, and it looks like you've accomplished something, Leticia, but it's not the most important thing, right? So the maturity index helps us to show a CEO where are your most important opportunities, right? Secondly, we look at, I call it the organizational identity. Where is your leadership misaligned? If you're one leadership, I show people that image where it's either a duck or a rabbit. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I go, if half of your leaders see your company as a duck, and they're making decisions based on that, and the other half of your leaders see you as a rabbit, and they're making decisions based on that, this is why you have misalignment in your organization. So we look to see, where does leadership see the identity of the company? Because they're making decisions about people and resources and strategy based on that, right? And to cull it down to like, it's super, super basic. Like if some of your leaders see the company as a traditional organization, but other leaders see it as an innovative organization, do you see how that's going to cause conflict in the company? And then the third thing we look at is, where are we going to have problems? And this is a people thing, implementing change. Where are we going to struggle internally? Like, who is it that's going to struggle with change? What I see is leaders are not bad at change management. What I mean by that is the tactics of change, right? Here's where we're headed. Here are the steps. Here are the milestones. Here's how we're going to know when we get there. Leaders are pretty good at that. What they're not good at is moving the people through the change. And the people are what affect the change, right? And that's why 70% of change initiatives fail. So we're looking at where are we going to struggle in that company with change so we can get ahead of it. And if my marketing person put executive coach, well, I have done executive coaching. I don't do it now. I would say the way I coach in organizations is when we come up with these strategies, I work with leaders because they have to be able to enroll people in those strategies or nothing happens. So we start there. That's really what builds out the blueprint. And then this is what I hear from my clients, unlike other consulting firms, we are there for execution. We're not just going to give you the idea and then leave you holding the bag, which I think is the thing that's most frustrating to CEOs. So if I walk into a client organization, probably 60% or 70% of the people in that company know my name. They know who I am because I've been in meetings with them implementing a new process or rolling out a new, sales enablement strategy or whatever it is, right? So is that helpful?
Absolutely. I think it's you laying out the a little bit of a difference in terms of the executive coaching with the companies and scaling it. It's even if you, and of course we'll have your webpage on the show notes, which is janegentry.com. But even then you have different things you focus on, like you already spoke about a little bit about growing pains, sales effectiveness, but even exit planning and succession. Like, what can you bring? Like, I think more and more you see, coming from a family business myself, I get approached many times, like, have you thought about an exit? Have you thought about and then obviously sometimes I know that companies and founders build to exit, but then also more and more they are seeing their companies as generational wealth transfer, where they can leave.
Most don't make it past the second generation.
Yeah.
And you should build your company for wealth, whether you're going to sell it or not.
That's great. That's great advice.
Because you want to hand off to the next generation a healthy company. And so I wouldn't say that I think the term exit planning is kind of meaningless at this point. If I told you 5 people that I know that say they do exit planning, they do completely different things, right? They have completely different parts of it. But what I like to do with CEOs is I want them to know these are the things in your company that a buyer looks at. Everybody gets caught up on EBITDA. EBITDA is important. It's great. It's not the thing alone that will sell your company or that will create wealth in your company. People look at the sustainability of the organization, which means what does your client mix look like? What are the processes you have internally in all of your departments? What is your leadership succession plan that you have in your organization, right? And so the things that we're working on with leaders are actually making their company more valuable. But when we get invited in, it's usually for these growing pains. That's what I refer to them, right? It's when our revenue is great, like we're doing fantastic. Why is everything breaking? Why is our revenue the best ever, but our processes don't work? Our leaders are stressed out. Our profit margin is declining. We're not retaining new clients. So that's when we get invited in, because there's that disconnect at that those are watershed moments where your revenue and your organizational structure don't match anymore. And that's why we start with that maturity index. Where is that broken? But we're also working with the CEO to say, all right, you have to start to think differently, because that will cause you to plan differently and execute differently. So if you're doing budget-based strategy, you need to start doing assumption-based strategy, right? So that's where the and I'm making air quotes here, that's where the coaching comes in, right?
Very interesting. I'm a big believer of Einstein's quote, like it's insanity is doing the same thing over and over with the same strategy and expecting a different result, right?
Don't plant a tomato seed and think you're going to grow a strawberry.
Yes, I'm a big believer. I see it, and people sometimes, like in my own business, like say, you're trying this. Even when I started the podcast, which I didn't start for business at all, and I don't interview people in my industry. It's very few the ones. I mean, Martin Cooper, inventor of the cell phone, that's somebody in telecom that I wanted to have just because how inspirational he was. But at the same time, people like we minimize like even initiatives that are disconnected. Even getting to know people like you that, advise CEOs and then, and just you getting this information and then just being exposed to other things. And so I'm a big believer of changing strategies, like trial and error, like try it for a while, 6 months, implement something new, see what results it brings to the table, and then maybe adjust.
Where I see strategies fail regularly is either, I think I have a video on this. You have too many initiatives, right? You really can't do more than 3 at a year, right? You have the wrong initiatives. You have you don't have the resources for those, right? If you can't resource against those initiatives, they're not going to happen. And you don't have like a 90-day check-in plan to course correct. Those are the things that I see regularly where CEOs, I'll say, before we look at strategy for 2026, let's look at 2025. How many of these things actually got implemented? Well, let's figure out why. So we're not, to your point with Einstein, let's not do the same thing again and fail again, right? So we tackle too many things, and we don't do our strategies based on assumptions about the market, our competitors, our resources internally, what's going to do the best for our company. So, and you talked about succession and exit. The times when I get phone calls about exit is when CEOs are exhausted and they're ready to go. They're like, I want to sell my business. I want to be out in a year. Well, by then, I can't help you do anything to improve the value of your business. So I just say, go to an exit planner and see if they can pretty it up for you, create a great story, because there's no point in hiring me to come in for a year. I can't make anything meaningful happen. And
that's a great point. And in our case, we're on generation 2. So I don't know, but I do feel, because I have been from Venezuela where a lot of immigrants went. I've seen a lot of big companies like that generate an incredible amount of wealth in those golden years of Venezuela. And then, of course, we've had 20 years of the most incomprehensible political situation one can imagine. So you've had to manage really against all odds. My brother calls it the flight simulator. You learn to fly the plane with one engine, and then you get the other engine shut down, and then the other engine shut down because you're dealing with a government that really their mission is get all the companies bankrupt. And it's a very, very interesting model. But in any case, I find it that the ones that have survived even against the odds are the ones that have a deep-rooted cultural legacy, motivator behind it all. It's not only about the money. It's about the legacy. It's about the hard work. It's about what we're bringing to the table. Like in our case, we always seen like we're enabling communications for us to bring a tower on an island in the Caribbean where these people couldn't make a call before. That gives me great joy. And more than the wealth we are generating. I mean, everyone wants to make money. That's obviously not a secret, but it's like where that purpose, it's so much higher than that keeps you going, even when times are rough.
Yeah, I tell young salespeople that what I learned early on in my sales career was when I focused on my pocket, I was not as successful as I was when I focused on the success of my client. If my goal was, I'm going to get this person a raise or a promotion because of the work we're doing together, I made a lot more money than I did when I was just freaking out about the number and what my commission was going to be. And so I do think that purpose, when a company and a leader have a purpose, and the CEOs that I interview on the podcast, a vast majority of them are driven by that, and driven by developing or providing an environment for success for their people.
I love that.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love that. And it's a perfect segue for you to, just tell us briefly about the podcast. Of course, we're going to have the link so that people, because I think there's so much learning there when you're listening the stories of the CEOs. You have a great interview style, and it's very conversational, just like this. And you really uncover the struggles too about the CEO, because I think there's sometimes a disconnect, and you see people that are so successful, they are CEOs of the biggest companies, but deep down they're just human beings with challenges, with things they don't know about, with people they don't like or like. What are some of your nuggets of wisdom, so to speak?
They're surprisingly open. I wasn't expecting that when I started the podcast. I started the podcast because my team everybody's been bugging me to write a book for 20 years. I have absolutely no desire to write a book. But my background. So I said, I'll tell you what, if we could come up with a valuable idea, meaning valuable to our customers and our market, I will do a podcast. And what I realized running a mid-market company is, gosh, what a lonely job. Now I have an amazing network. So I have I've always had an informal board of directors of smart people who care about my success, right? But man, you're making hard decisions every day. And if you don't have a group, a Vistage group, or you don't have a Jane Gentry that's walking beside you, even if you do, what a lonely job, right? And so I thought, I'd love to see CEOs share with other CEOs. What I've learned is that a lot of people that I've interviewed have come from very humble beginnings. I've learned that, I interviewed a CEO who said, Jane, I don't even have a 4-year college degree. His business is wildly successful. And he said, I sit in rooms with these people with MBAs, and I think, I don't even have a degree. And I said, at this point in your career with that kind of success, you're still carrying that around? Dude, if you knew what my degree was, you'd be like, how does this woman even get to do what she does? Carrying around that imposter syndrome, still after having a wildly successful organization. As I said to you, I find them to be very purpose-driven and people-driven more than I expected. I get a lot of military people on the podcast, which, I love because I think that's a great starting point for leadership. The military develops a lot of great leaders. What else? And their willingness to say, yeah, this is where I screwed up. I had an owner say to me, he's on his second company, which is very successful. He said his first company didn't do so well. He got it to a certain point and he just couldn't get it any further. And so he let it go. And I said, well, did you ever do kind of a postmortem and think back and say to yourself, this is what the thing was? And he goes, oh yeah, absolutely. I said, what was it? He said, me.
Oh, wow.
Really? Tell me more about that. He said, I was a great individual contributor. I put people around me to do the dirty work, but it was really all me. You can't grow a company or lead a company like that. That's not the role of a CEO. So to be able to say, man, I was the problem.
Yes.
I love it.
That's growth, and and I agree with you. It's people are more vulnerable, I think, that when we care to believe, and I love that you brought in the imposter syndrome, because it comes a lot around women in leadership, but I've always said this is a common thing, with both genders.
Please, if you don't have a little bit of imposter syndrome, you're probably not a really great leader. You know,
exactly.
If you're not carrying around a little bit of that, I mean, that's what drives us, right? Yeah. I think it's kind of like nerves before you get on stage. I've been on stage for, 40 years. And I say to people, if you don't have a little bit of nervousness right before you're going to do a keynote or something, man, you're going to be flat. You need that just little bit of energy. And I think that's what imposter syndrome does for leaders. It gives us that little bit of drive. The other thing I find is a lot of these CEOs are very open about their faith. And I say, when you get stuck, what do? And they say, I pray.
Yes, I know that that's what I said when you interviewed me, and you said thank you for saying that, and I was gonna touch upon that, because you did say I love it when people recognize that and it's the same experience for me here in Back to Basics. Is a lot of people credit their spiritual practice of sorts, call it religion, call it prayer, call it meditation, but that connection with the spiritual, our spiritual energy, the one that we cannot touch and we cannot see, but that others feel. And I heard somewhere it says energy is contagious. And I think it's a sign of a great leader. If after I speak with you, I want to hear some more and I'm energized and I believe that I can do something that maybe when we started talking, I didn't believe possible. I think that's a sign of the ripple effects our energy has on others.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anything you care to share about it in terms of the role of your faith in your own journey?
Oh, yeah. I used to write on my wall. I now have really lovely wallpaper, so I don't do that. But I used to write on my wall, things I'm going to accomplish, things God needs to accomplish. Like I'd give him a to-do list. One was that stupid book, because I don't want to, I'm like, yeah, he can. But, I had somebody working for me years ago that kept wanting to meet and come up with our business plan. Now, Leticia, I have some partners, right? But basically it's me and, my marketing team, my admin, whatever. So I said to her, no, I don't really think we need to build out a whole business plan. And then she came to me again. She said, Jane, we really need a business plan. And the third time she said, I said, well, Heidi, let me tell you what the plan is. We head in a direction. And I'm happy to share that with you because I'm pretty clear on that. We wait for God to open a door. We try to have the courage to walk through the door. That's the plan. We're not IBM, right? And probably 2 weeks later, she quit, which is fine. It's not for everybody. But, if you look at my career, there is no way that I could have ever predicted what I do today and what an amazing combination it is of my past, my education, my early career in the theater, my experience in enterprise, consulting in enterprise organizations. There's no way that I could have taken all that stuff on my own and smushed it all together to make this thing that I do today, which is so unbelievably fulfilling for me. So I take no credit for that. It's really just trying to be conscious of the doors that open and trying to have the courage to step into them. I never had a drive to work in the mid-market until I ran companies in the mid-market. And I thought, oh my gosh, these folks are so grossly under-resourced. I mean, things that we did in enterprise that are common practice, mid-market organizations don't even know what that is, right? They don't know where to go to get these resources, and they don't know what they should pay. That woman that paid $180,000 for a branding exercise was a $25 million company. She got totally ripped off. So that was never, like, I never said to myself, oh, I'm going to move my practice into the mid-market. It was a part of that experience that I had. And then I had a little bit of PTSD when I quit that job. I sat on my couch for 3 weeks and I thought, what the heck was the purpose of this? After 20 years of a very successful practice. And this is what it was, I believe, is to shift the focus to leaders in a market that are underserved, who are sold every day by consultants who've never done what they've done. They've never been exposed to best practices in larger organizations. And yeah, I could have never made it up. I could have never done that on my own.
Well, I think definitely you put it beautifully, where there's that conviction and that's something that a door is going to get opened somehow, and that obviously you were prepared for, because I think that to the point, like maybe having a plan, but being the plan a little flexible so that when the door opens, you're not so stuck. Because I do believe, like you, like I'm also a planner, but certain things you cannot plan for. And I sometimes believe in when they say in mindfulness, they say, don't worry about the future, because you don't know, anything can happen. So you're worrying about something, a hypothetical.
Oh yeah. The 10-year plan forget that. We don't even do 5-year plans for anybody anymore. Why bother? Yeah. It's a waste of time.
The planning or the 10-year
5-year. Try to look out 5 years. That's a waste.
Yes.
So, we look at 24 months out and we do a little bit looser for like where we might be in 3 years, but that's very fluid.
Yes.
That's why that assumption-based planning is so critical, because you've got to build your strategy on things that you believe are happening, things that are going to happen, right? Yeah.
Well, this is like a wealth of knowledge, and definitely I'm sure that many people will tune into your powerful podcast and because it's just so much and actionable insights, which I love, Jane. So I appreciate that. And I always like to ask. I ask about faith, but I also always end my interviews asking about what makes you tick. And I know there's probably many things, but I usually try to ask about that moment where on those 3 weeks that you went into your couch when you were in a career transition or a pivot or something where maybe it's not that clear. You kind of know that the window is going to open, but at that point you kind of don't believe it. What is it that you connect with so that you get ticking again and get your act together?
Well, what drives me is 2 things. One, to empower people, to strengthen them, whether it's a CEO or my ex-sister-in-law that got out of an abusive relationship. I love to see people have ahas. I love that. And I think sometimes men don't step into their I don't say step into your power. It sounds really woo-hooey, and I'm not that way. But I love to see people have an aha,
I love that.
And feel like they have learned something, have accomplished something. I think I'm kind of a teacher at heart. I don't know where that came from, but I love to see people do something they didn't think they could do, or do something in their business they didn't think they could do. So I like that. And to your point, I've never really worked with a lot of women. Frankly, my whole career has been my sister said maybe I've even become a man at this point. I don't know. I've worked with so many men.
I can relate to that.
And so I never really bought into the, the women not stepping into their power, because I'm not that way, right?
Mhm.
But women CEOs I've worked with, I do find that I've had to work with them differently than with men, that they maybe have a harder time sometimes making a hard decision. And men do the same thing. I mean, one thing I say to people is the number one thing I see in CEOs where they mess up is they wait too long to act on a decision they know is right. And the opportunity is missed, right? Or something bad happens because of that. But I think the women I've worked with do that more. Or
Well,
feel
there
the
might be a
need.
book.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm an expert on women. I think my sister's right. I might,
Well, you have a good perspective, I think. I have been accused of similar things, like almost like you're almost like a guy, or because
Yeah.
sometimes you say, well,
I'm
my
just used
job
to
is to
that.
make them forget that I'm a woman. So to
My
actually be part of what's happening.
Yeah, and some of the female students from Harvard, when I'm doing that coaching, they'll start a sentence with, well, as a woman, when you do, and I say to them, I got to be frank with you. I mean, when I walk into a room, that's how many women are in the room is just not even on my radar. I don't think about that. I'm there for a business problem or something else. It's just not even something I think about. Now, when I was younger, I mean, I just turned 60, so
Oh, you look wonderful.
well, thank you. I'm old, but when I was younger, did I deal with a lot of misogyny? And I mean, I lost a job, and the guy said, frankly, goes, "Well, you didn't get that job, Jane, because you don't pee standing up." So I mean, it's happened, right? But men have also been my biggest champions and my most important mentors. So I don't know. It's not something I think about.
Well, I'm 100% with you on that one. And I always say the moment we can all say that legitimately, where I don't think about it. I don't think if it's a guy or a woman. I think that's what we all want to achieve. I think if I advocate for anything, is that the moment where we don't even think if they pee standing up or not. It's like,
well, but I also said to the women that worked for me, the companies I ran had a lot of young women in them. And I said to them, I think it's important for you to understand you are employed. You are not indentured. So if you aren't getting what you want, and you have something of value to offer, go find somebody that appreciates that. You're not indentured to this organization. Your career is in your hands. Don't wait for somebody to hand you something or make it better. Be somebody who has something valuable to offer and go where you're appreciated. I did that.
I love it. I love it. And I love that those are such powerful words to end up, because I know somebody out there is listening to this and it resonated, because it's impossible for a statement like that not to resonate, that you are in control of your career, of your life, or whatever is happening to you. And you have the power to say goodbye and find something that aligns better with what you want. So I thank you, Jane, so much for the time. I mean, I can tell we could have several spin-offs episodes. There's so much to talk, but I think you share great wisdom, and I appreciate you and all you do. And please, to my audience, check out Jane CEO's Unscripted and her webpage. And, if you're in the mid-market companies and you're in need of somebody brilliant to shed some light, you now know where to find Jane.
Thank you. You're my new business development leader right there.
Anytime.
Thank you.
I'm happy to
Thank
push
you for having me. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you all for joining into Back to Basics. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.